So welcome to Artscapades at the Norwalk Public Library. Women's History Month is a celebration of women's contributions to history, culture, and society, and has been observed annually in the month of March in the United States since 1987. Today, in honor of Women's History Month, we present Artscapades, Great Women in Art from Renaissance to Baroque. In this lecture, Artscapades will look at the lives and works of four remarkable women. Now I'm going to probably destroy their names, but
well, you can save them for me.
okay, I'll save them. I'll save them for you. Four remarkable women who broke boundaries to achieve artistic acclaim and paved the way for future generations of women artists. Robin Hoffman and Jody Stifelman of Artscapades began teaching art appreciation in 1998. They presented at libraries, art centers, and museums in Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, and Florida. So please join me in welcoming Jody today with Artscapades.
Thanks, Cindy. I'm going to share my screen. So I mentioned to somebody, this is a whole new system. So I think you've got my screen now, Cindy. Oh, let's see.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And yeah, if everyone else can keep themselves on mute, that would be great. So we really do appreciate Cindy and the Norwalk Public Library for having us back repeatedly. I want to thank my partner, Robin Hoffman. Putting together these lectures is truly a team effort, but tonight I'm sharing this one with you. I will be able to address your questions or comments at the end of the lecture. And if you want, you can put them in the chat box as the lecture progresses if it helps you to remember what you wanted to say or share. The last couple of times I've left people absolutely speechless, which has been great. So as you heard from Cindy, March is Women's History Month, and tonight we're going to be looking at four remarkable women who broke boundaries to achieve artistic acclaim and paved the way for future generations of women artists. But first, we're going to look back to see what was happening all the way back in the Renaissance. So the Renaissance was undoubtedly the most important period of art that has ever occurred. Yet while women appeared in many of the most important works from the Renaissance, and here Botticelli's best known work, The Birth of Venus, or as some like to call it, Venus on the Half Shell, the movement was dominated by male artists. Female artists were not seen at that point as capable enough of producing worthy art. When people think of the Renaissance period, more than likely the artworks of Botticelli, Michelangelo, and Da Vinci first come to mind. While we may be able to easily identify a male Renaissance artist as their names have become ingrained in both art and world history, Renaissance women are scarcely spoken about. Much of Renaissance art revolves around learning about classical antiquity, philosophy, anatomy, or mathematics, not to mention the skills learned as an apprentice in a professional art studio. Gender norms in the Renaissance meant women's education rarely exceeded what was needed to be for wives and mothers. With almost no opportunities for apprenticeships with male artists, women were at a disadvantage. Throughout the Baroque period and much of the world's artistic history, women have been portrayed as either saints or sinners, pictures of purity or wicked temptresses. Here, Vermeer's Girl with a Pearl Earring, often considered his best-loved painting, draws the viewer into the painting, suggesting that they are the one who has made the girl turn her head. European women were, of course, painting, drawing, sketching, but female artists faced institutional obstacles to their development that outweighed any individual gift. No admission to life drawing classes, no apprenticeships in large studios, no easy hobnobbing with patrons, no access to prizes or residencies. For 3 centuries, women who exhibited extraordinary artistic talent were not allowed to enter academies with their works, no matter how magnificent they were. Despite all challenges, some women managed to become acclaimed artists, even leading ones. Lavina Tierlink was a Flemish artist born in 1510. She was the daughter of a renowned illuminator and miniaturist artist named Simon Benning. Her grandfather was also an illuminator who worked for royalty. Illuminators were those that painted the illustrations within illuminated manuscripts. As the eldest of 5 girls, Tierlink was likely trained as an illuminator by her father so that she could assume the family business. In her 20s, Tierlink was achieving notoriety for her talent as a miniaturist. She is credited with inventing the oval shape for the miniature portrait. In 1545, Tierlink married, and they would have one son. The year after their marriage, Tierlink and her husband moved to England, where she was a highly paid member of the Tudor court. Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary Tudor, and Elizabeth I commissioned works, including miniatures. She was also a gentlewoman of the Privy Chamber. Tierlink died on June 23, 1576, at the age of 66. Though Tierlink's work was well documented in writings and well received by the court, there are few paintings that survive today that can definitively be attributed to her. She rarely signed her work. However, there are some pieces that are attributed to her based on their place of origin and the fashion style of the sitters depicted, in addition to other relative dating methods. Lavinia Fontana is regarded as the first professional female artist in Western Europe, whose stratospheric success story remains underappreciated. Fontana was born on August 24, 1552. She was trained by her father, who was a teacher at the school of Bologna. Fontana began her professional career by painting small devotional paintings on copper, which had popular appeal as papal and diplomatic gifts, given the value and luster of the metal. In 1577, Fontana married, and this self-portrait was done before her wedding as a gift for her soon-to-be husband's family. Instead of offering a traditional dowry, Fontana painted to earn an income. Fontana's husband took care of the household, which included raising their 11 children, and served as his wife's agent and painting assistant, including painting minor elements of paintings, such as the draperies. After moving from Bologna to Rome in the early 1600s, Fontana became a portraitist at the court of Pope Paul V. Fontana's close attention to detail displayed the wealth of the sitter, and it is what made her so popular among wealthy patrons. In addition to portraits, Fontana later created large-scale paintings with religious and mythological themes, which sometimes included female nudes. And as the Art Academy barred women from viewing any nude body, it is believed that Fontana's models were family members. Fontana died on August 11, 1614, less than 2 weeks before her 62nd birthday. Today, only 32 signed and dated works by Fontana have been identified, and about 25 more are attributed to her. Elisabetta Sorani was born on January 8, 1638, into an artistic family. Her father was a painter of the School of Bologna and an art merchant. Sorani's training began in her father's studio alongside her 2 sisters. By her mid-teens, Sorani had already outpaced her teachers, including her father, and soon enough was earning herself commissions from patrons that included the Grand Duke Cosimo III de' Medici. In 1654, when Sorani's father became incapacitated by gout, she began running her family's workshop, and at this point became the family's primary breadwinner. Between her students' fees and portrait commissions, she was able to support the family. Her studio was highly successful, partially due to the progressive atmosphere of Bologna, where women artists were relatively accepted and celebrated. Sorani was elected a full professor of the Accademia di San Luca in Rome. As such, she was considered a master with the right to head her own studio and teach. It was highly unusual for a woman to have male students at that time. Sorani died suddenly on August 28, 1665, at the age of just 27. Some scholars believed her death was due to overworking. Others claim she was poisoned. Sorani was an artist of incomparable brilliance who maintained a vital career that was limited only by her untimely death. Her career and legacy helped ease the way for the many women painters and art educators who followed. But what if you weren't the daughter of an artist and wanted to paint? In Renaissance Italy, most women from the upper classes had only two options: marriage or the convent. So with this background in mind, let's look at tonight's four artists, starting with a look at a woman who chose the latter, the convent. Sister Plotilla Nelli is recognized as the first woman who was a painter in Florence during the Italian Renaissance. Though it has not been possible to confirm that this portrait is of Nelli, it is the only image that has ever been suggested to be of her. Paulina Senna Margherita Nelli was born in 1524 into a wealthy Florentine merchant family allied with the Medici. At the age of 14, Nelli became a nun, entering the Dominican convent Santa Caterina da Siena, located in Piazza San Marco, where she adopted the name Plotilla. Over the years, she was named a prioress of the convent 3 times. In the Renaissance, cloistered convents were home to many educated and talented women who enjoyed freedoms denied their married counterparts in the outside world. One of these freedoms was to pursue an artistic career, considered inappropriate and impossible for most women during that time. For Renaissance nuns with a creative bent, convent life was not a problem. It was a creative solution. The convent of Santa Caterina was managed by the Dominican friars of San Marco and led by Savonarola. Savonarola was known for his prophecies of civic glory, the destruction of secular art and culture, and his calls for Christian renewal. Savonarola's preachings promoted devotional painting and drawing by religious women in order to avoid sloth or laziness, so the convent became a center for nun artists. Nelli's sister Costanza also entered the convent. As Sister Petronilla, Nelli's sister wrote a biography about Savonarola, while Nelli devoted her time to developing her art characterized by religious themes. Nelli became known for her ability to portray emotion in the faces of the people she painted. Nelli broke the mold in more ways than one. As a self-taught artist, she set up a successful workshop where she instructed other sisters in the art of painting, using preparatory drawings from her own extensive collection. Nelli also helped to support the convent with the sale of her workshop's devotional works of art. St. Catherine receiving the stigmata and St. Dominic receives the rosary were both rescued from storage and restored in 2009. They and a few other paintings by Nelli can now be viewed in the San Salvi Museum, a former monastery on the outskirts of Florence. Nelli is the only female artist to be referenced in Vasari's famous Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. However, in the book, Vasari criticized Nelli, explaining that her best works were, quote, copies, and that her limitations were due to her lack of formal training, especially in the case of portraying men, as her religious vocations prohibited the study of the male nude. Nelli's male figures are said to have feminine characteristics. Nelli's works were of high quality, and she enjoyed the favor of many patrons, many of them women, for whom she painted altarpieces, devotional images, and miniatures. Nelli's works were not only very popular, but also were considered very precious. People who owned a painting by a nun assigned an almost magical power to the work. Unfortunately, most of these individual small works have been lost. The Uffizi, which has begun a long-term project for promoting women artists, held an exhibition of Nelli's work in 2017. The rediscovery of Nelli and the first restoration of her works are due to the AWA, the Advancing Women Artists Foundation, a U.S. organization, and in particular to its founder, Jane Fortune. Initially, only 3 works had been attributed to Nelli. Now, 16 additional works by Nelli have been uncovered, which makes a total of 19 and counting. Influenced by the teachings of Savonarola, Nelli's paintings reveal her own religious fervor in their intense emotion. They show her appreciation of Renaissance art, particularly that of the Florentine monk, Father Bartolomeo. According to Vasari, Father Bartolomeo left his drawings to his pupil, Father Polina, who upon his death left them with, quote, the nun that painted. Nelly undertook the almost 10-foot-high altarpiece of the Lamentation with Saints for the Dominican convent of St. Catherine of Siena, now the San Marco Museum. It is her most famous public work. Her use of Father Bartolomeo's drawings as models for her work is clear. In Nelly's Lamentation, she seems to have freely adapted the Father's composition to include 2 additional women next to the Virgin Mary. These figures and the men standing behind them openly express their grief through their gestures and visible tears. At Christ's feet is Mary Magdalene. Nelly thought big, and as we can see, did not limit herself to small and pretty images as most of her contemporaries would have been forced to restrict themselves to. Nelly's Last Supper is a first in the history of art by women. No woman artist ever painted this subject before she did. By creating and signing this enormous fresco-like work depicting one of Florence's most loved subjects, Nelly successfully placed herself amongst the ranks of her male counterparts. This is also considered Nelly's most significant work because of its size, nearly 23 feet long. One of the most frequent questions people ask when talking about Nelly's Last Supper is if, besides the fact that Nelly signed it, is if experts can, quote, tell if it was created by a woman. Well, it's a tricky question, but one historian says his focus goes straight to the table. According to gender expectations in the Renaissance period, women were best at rendering details like lacework or precious objects. Nelly's Last Supper is far more elaborate than that of her male counterparts in Florence, who created the 7 well-known Florentine Last Suppers, and it is thought that Nelly would probably have seen at least 4 of them. In contrast to the men's Last Suppers, the food in Nelly's painting is placed on a long table covered with a crisp, freshly ironed tablecloth. We are looking at a peasant-style meal that would have been similar to those served at Nelly's convent. In addition, she included fine Chinese porcelain bowls and platters. Porcelain from the Far East was an extremely rare commodity. Nelly may have seen it growing up or may have seen it at the convent, which was full of Florentine noblewomen who typically brought personal belongings with them to the convent. Nelly's Last Supper remained unseen in her convent's dining hall until 1808, when all convents were closed under Napoleon's rule. Rolled up and put into storage until 1853, which caused damage and paint loss, it was moved to the friars' private dining hall in the Dominican Church of Santa Maria Novella. Restoration, sponsored again by the AWA, was completed in 2018. After being hidden from the public eye for over 450 years, Nelly's Last Supper now hangs in the Santa Maria Novella Museum Refectory in Florence. Nelly died on May 7th, 1588, at the age of 64, and was probably buried inside her convent in a general tomb with the other prioresses, but neither that convent nor the church connected to it exists today. In 1853, the convent was supposedly annexed into the Galleria della Accademia and was briefly part of the Accademia del Bell'Arte. It is believed that many more works by Nelly are awaiting rediscovery, especially as Vasari said she painted prolifically for the houses of gentlemen in Florence, as well as for the convent where she lived and painted for over 50 years. So why had Florence, so known for its Renaissance art, overlooked Nelly, as had most of the art world? Was it because she was trained in a convent and not apprenticed in an artist's studio? Or was it simply because she was a woman, and beyond that, a nun? Well, today, she is no longer overlooked. If you're interested in learning more, the book Invisible Woman, Forgotten Artists of Florence by Dr. Jane Fortune describes the history of female artists in Florence and their hundreds of works in the city's museums or storehouses. The book contains 26 chapters on 35 women artists, including Nelly, who were active in Florence. Or if you prefer a video, In 2013, an Emmy-winning PBS television documentary was made based on Dr. Fortune's book and features a segment on Nellie and the restoration of two of her works that we've just looked at. The video is available for viewing on the PBS website and through YouTube. Sofonisba Anguissola was one of the first women artists to establish an international reputation. And while she was the best-known female painter of the Italian Renaissance, she is relatively unknown in today's art history. Anguissola was born in Cremona in northern Italy in about 1532 into a family of ancient nobility but with limited economic resources. She was the first of 7 children, 6 of whom were girls. Anguissola's father was a vestryman, and one of his duties was to find the artists for the decoration of the cathedral and other churches of the city. When he saw that his eldest 2 daughters had an aptitude for painting, he sent 14-year-old Anguissola and her sister Elena to study art with Bernardino Campi, a respected religious painter and portraitist in Cremona. Anguissola's father saw learning to paint as part of the new humanist education for a woman of high social standing. Anguissola never sold a single painting. Her earliest works were self-portraits that testify to her modesty. Anguissola identifies herself in a number of her paintings as a virgin, as female virtue was founded in chastity. Female virtue was also understood to include obedience, modesty, and silence. Anguissola's demeanor and simple dress, usually a black jacket with a white lace collar, conform to these aspects of virtue. Instead of continuing her art studies, Anguissola's sister Elena chose to enter a convent in Mantua. To commemorate Elena's taking of her vows, Anguissola painted this image, which is thought to be Anguissola's earliest known original work. Wearing a white habit, Elena holds a book of prayers, which is covered in burnt sienna-colored leather and decorated in gold. This book is the only source of detail in a painting where light is one of the main themes. What is most striking about this portrait is the depth and intensity of Elena's gaze, which is directed at the viewer. Anguissola has captured her sister with exceptional honesty and insight, drawing us into the mental and emotional space of the painting. Among Anguissola's earliest paintings were self-portraits that attest to her competency in letters, music, and painting, and as already mentioned, testify to her modesty. In this work, Anguissola shows herself holding a small book which bears the inscription, Sofonisba Anguissola, a virgin, made this herself in 1554. The small size of the book suggests a devotional book or book of love sonnets. Either would have been appropriate reading material for a woman of Anguissola's station. Before she was 20, Anguissola created this work, one of her most famous paintings. This portrayal of an everyday, informal, domestic scene was a first in Italian painting. With it, Anguissola is credited with inventing genre painting 100 years before painting genre scenes came into vogue. This painting shows 3 of Anguissola's sisters, Lucia, Europa, and Minerva, playing chess with their governess looking over them. The fact that the girls are engaged in a friendly game of chess is something that is extraordinary in of itself. During the Renaissance, chess was thought to be a game of intelligence and was therefore commonly reserved for the gentlemen of the day. Women were usually painted performing domestic pursuits. Chess had undergone many rule changes since it was introduced in Italy in 1510, and the new game of chess being played in Anguissola's time was played very much like it is played today. The sister to the left looks out at the viewer after winning the game. Anguissola shows her proficiency as a painter by positioning the figures in different poses. Their gazes lead our eye around the canvas and eventually back to Anguissola herself, who occupies a position outside of the canvas. Anguissola further shows her skill by painting a variety of textures in her sister's clothes and that of the imported carpet, which is under the chessboard. Anguissola's style drew notice and brought her commissions throughout Italy. Sometime around 1554, Anguissola left for Rome, where she met Michelangelo, who showed her great kindness and encouraged her in drawing and design. While Michelangelo was known to have a kind personality, he would not have spent time with Anguissola, especially during his old age, if she had not been gifted. It was during this time that Anguissola's drawings changed from the elongated forms of her teacher, Campi, to the well-rounded, anatomically correct forms taught by Michelangelo. Anguissola supposedly made this drawing as a study piece in response to Michelangelo's suggestion that drawing a crying child would be difficult. We are looking at one of Anguissola's younger sisters as she calms their only brother who had been bitten by a crawfish. Michelangelo kept the drawing. It is thought to have been seen by Caravaggio and to be his inspiration for this work. Anguissola painted this remarkable double portrait in which she shows herself being painted by Campi. Anguissola has made herself central, higher, and larger than her teacher, who is somewhat marginalized to the side of the picture plane. There are a few reasons why Anguissola may have painted the portrait this way. This work was painted a full 10 years after Anguissola's apprenticeship with Campi had ended, and he had long since moved away from Cremona. He went on to paint portraits for moderately distinguished northern Italian princesses, while she went on to work at the court of the most powerful monarch in Europe. Anguissola's contemporaries may have seen two reasons to praise this double portrait. First, Anguissola introduced a new compositional device, a teacher painting his student, which was painted by the student. This demonstrated her gift for invention. Second, it was probably seen as a female artist's acknowledgement of her master being the one who created her, a way to pay homage to Campi for helping her to develop her own widely acknowledged talent. But it is thought that there is more to why she painted herself larger than Campi. The fact is that Anguissola's worth as a painter, when calculated by the prestige of her patrons, became greater than that of her mentor, a man, not to mention a man of lesser social rank. Anguissola painted more self-portraits than almost any artist of her time, in part because she was considered so amazing that people wanted paintings done both by her and of her. In a move away from the formal static style of the day, Anguissola liked to highlight her subjects' hobbies, even her own. And here she is playing the spinet, a type of harpsichord. In addition, Anguissola painted miniatures, and this miniature shows Anguissola's meticulous technique and a Renaissance taste for puzzles. The interwoven letters at the center of the medallion form a complex monogram that spells out her father's name, Amilcare, and around the rim, the medallion is inscribed in Latin, and I'm translating, the maiden Sophonisba Anguissola, depicted by her own hand from a mirror at Cremona. Anguissola's reputation spread beyond Italy, and in 1559, she was invited to Madrid to the court of Philip II, where in addition to painting portraits, she was an attendant to the Infanta Isabella Clara Eugenia and a lady-in-waiting to her mother, Philip's third wife, Elizabeth of Valois, with whom she developed a friendship. Instead of being compensated monetarily as male court painters were, female artists often received luxurious gifts for which no records were kept. As such, there are fewer historical clues and much controversy in attributing paintings to Anguissola. An example of that is this portrait of Philip II, which was originally attributed to a male fellow court painter, but it was ultimately attributed to Anguissola in 1996. In it, she shows a somber Philip II fingering his Order of the Golden Fleece and dressed in the high hat and black clothing that typified his midlife. Anguissola's residency in the Spanish court lasted more than a decade, and during that time, she was asked to paint portraits of the royal family and its court. This subject of this portrait was the sister of Philip II. She married Prince Juan of Portugal, but just 2 years after their marriage, Juan died and Juana returned to Spain. Juana devoted her energies to religious life and founded a monastery, which became an important center of artistic patronage. And this portrait shows Juana's religious devotion. The child by her side is probably a young aristocrat under her protection who is being prepared to enter the religious order. Interesting note is that Isabella Stewart Gardner bought this painting believing it to be by Titian, even though she had been warned that the attribution was in question. It was later reattributed to Anguissola and is one of just a few works by Anguissola in an American museum. Back in the court of Philip II in 1568, Elizabeth died in childbirth, and Anguissola found herself in an unusual position for her time. She was in her mid-30s and unmarried. Out of respect for Anguissola's friendship with his wife, Philip II arranged for Anguissola to marry a Sicilian nobleman, Fabrizio Moncada Pignatelli, and Anguissola received a royal pension that enabled her to continue working and tutoring would-be painters. Her private fortune also went to supporting her family back in Italy. After 8 years with the Spanish court, Anguissola and her husband, with the king's permission, left Spain. The couple settled in Palermo, where Fabrizio died in 1579. Unfortunately, the majority of Anguissola's paintings from this period burned in a fire in the Prado during the 17th century. After losing her husband, Anguissola
She
had
was
been in
damn close. She was darn
I'm sorry, can you
good.
turn
She
your,
was,
can you mute yourself, whoever's talking? Thank you. After
I was
losing
just,
her husband, Anguissola had been invited back to the court of Philip II, now in her late 40s and wanting to see her home and family back in Italy. Anguissola traveled to Genoa by sea and met and fell in love with the ship's captain, Orazio Lornaleni. It is believed that Anguissola proposed, and they married quickly against the wishes of her family, as her brother, now head of the family, considered Lomellini below his sister's station. The marriage, however, was a good one. They lived in Genoa, where Anguissola established a painting school. In this portrait, Anguissola addresses aristocratic culture. Believed to have been painted soon after her arrival in Genoa, this work shows Giuliano moving from childhood to adulthood. Childhood is represented by the younger, boyish page, and the now more adult Giuliano is shown on the pedestal where he is posing for Anguissola. By 1620, with her eyesight failing, thought to be from cataracts, Anguissola had returned to Palermo. Anguissola continued painting portraits throughout her life. This one shows her almost 80 years old, seated on a chair, holding a book and a piece of paper. Interesting to note is that she is dressed not altogether different from the outfit in her 1556 painting, black, modest, and reserved. In 1624, the year before she died, Anguissola was paid a visit by the Flemish painter Anthony van Dyck, a young man at the time, who made sketches and painted a portrait of her. Van Dyck wrote about Anguissola that, quote, "It was a great pleasure for her to have pictures placed in front of her. When I drew her portrait, she gave me several hints, not to get too high or too low, so the shadows to her wrinkles would not show too much." Anguissola never had any children, but appears to have been very close to her nieces and her stepson. In addition, she was an influential mentor to many aspiring artists right up until her death in 1625 at the age of 93. She was outlived by her second husband, who had her tomb inscribed, so Sophonisba, my wife, who is recorded among the illustrious women of the world, outstanding in portraying the images of man. Anguissola was among the most accomplished painters of the late Renaissance. Vasari, who saw her work in her father's house in 1566, noted in his book that she had, quote, "worked with deeper study and greater grace than any woman of our times at problems of design, for not only has she learned to draw, paint, and copy from nature and reproduce most skillfully works by other artists, but she has on her own painted some most rare and beautiful paintings." Today, Anguissola's paintings can be found in museums around the world. Well, perhaps the most iconic female artist to emerge from the Renaissance, as well as one of the most distinguished artists in history, was the Italian painter Artemisia Gentileschi. Artemisia Gentileschi was the only female follower of Caravaggio. Her innovative compositions and focus on biblical heroines set her apart from her male contemporaries. Gentileschi was both praised and criticized by contemporaries, recognized as having genius, yet seen as monstrous because she was a woman exercising a creative talent thought to be exclusively male. Gentileschi was born in Rome on July 8, 1593, to Orazio Gentileschi and Prudentia Montoni, who died when Gentileschi was 12. One of 4 children, she was their only daughter. Her father initially harbored no artistic ambitions for his daughter, envisioning a life as a nun for her instead. But Artemisia's ambition and talent soon asserted themselves. In this self-portrait, Gentileschi wears a luxurious costume and plays the lute to portray herself as a cultivated woman. Her low-cut bodice and direct gaze create an erotic overtone that was appropriate to the traditional associations of music and love. It also hints at Artemisia's reputation as a seductive woman. According to the custom among respectable Romans of the time, Gentileschi's father kept his young daughter confined to his house, which also functioned as his studio. Gentileschi served as an apprentice to her father. By the time she was 15, under her father's tutelage, she had begun to assimilate Caravaggio's methods. Other than artistic training under her father, Gentileschi had little or no schooling. She did not learn to read and write until she was an adult. At the age of 16, similar to what her father was working on, Gentileschi painted this image of the Madonna and Child. In both works, Mary's simple garb and surroundings suggest humility, while her solid physicality anchors her in this world. In Artemisia's work, she has subtly reminded us that this is no ordinary mother and child. Cherries reference heaven, and halos signify holiness. With sensitivity beyond her years, Artemisia's work affirms her skills and foretells her future success. By the time she was 17, Gentileschi had painted this, her stunning interpretation of Susanna and the Elders. This is Gentileschi's first dated and signed work and was considered so remarkably mature for a 17-year-old that many attributed it to her father. The work shows anatomical accuracy and advanced color and construction. Gentileschi's father may have guided her with the design. Gentileschi depicts the story of Susanna from the book of Daniel. Susanna is at her bath when the 2 elders accost her, threatening her with false accusations of adultery if she doesn't agree to their wishes. Adultery was punishable by death. Gentileschi portrays Susanna as vulnerable, frightened, and repulsed by their demands, while the men loom large, leering, and menacing. Painted when Gentileschi was 19 years old, we can see how well she captured textures, including the golden strands of hair, the lush fabric of the bed cover, and metal coins on bare flesh. Such sensuous effects are appropriate to the ancient Greek story of Danae, a young woman who was confined to a chamber by her father to prevent her from becoming pregnant. An oracle had predicted she would bear a son who would kill her own father. Zeus, king of the gods, was able to thwart the plan by transforming himself into a golden rain to impregnate Danae. In most of her paintings, Gentileschi shows a naked female body, yet whenever she portrays men in her paintings, they are always dressed. The church forbade women to draw or paint from naked male models. When Gentileschi's father recognized that she had advanced beyond his training, he hired his friend, the painter Agostino Tassi, to further her painting skills. Gentileschi accused Tassi of raping her. According to Gentileschi, Tassi attempted to be alone with her repeatedly and raped her when he finally succeeded in cornering her in her bedroom. He tried to placate her afterwards by promising to marry her and gained access to her bedroom repeatedly on the strength of that promise, but always avoided following through with the actual marriage. Gentileschi's father filed suit against Tassi for injury and damage. The trial followed a pattern familiar even today. She was accused of not having been a virgin at the time of the rape and of having had many lovers, and she was examined by midwives to determine whether she had been, quote, deflowered recently or a long time ago. Remarkably, the transcripts of the trial are still available today. After a lengthy trial, including an extremely painful lie detector test, which Gentileschi must have passed, Tassi was convicted and sentenced to a 5-year banishment from Rome, but records show that Tassi was only jailed for 8 months. This event had a tremendously negative impact on Gentileschi's reputation, and she suffered from gossip that branded her a promiscuous woman. During and soon after the trial, Gentileschi painted Judith beheading Holofernes. In the story, Judith, a beautiful widow, is able to enter the tent of Holofernes because of his desire for her. Holofernes was an Assyrian general who was about to destroy Judith's home, the city of Bethulia. Overcome with drink, he passes out and is decapitated by Judith. Painting this work was clearly a cathartic expression of Gentileschi's rage and proficiency. It is remarkable for its technical achievements, but also for the original way in which Gentileschi portrays Judith, who had long been a popular subject for art. To get Artemisia away from Rome, her father arranged for her to marry a Florentine painter named Pierantino Stiatesi. Shortly after the wedding, the couple went to Florence, where Gentileschi's father had asked for patronage for her from the Grand Duchess of Tuscany. Gentileschi had just started married life in Florence when she painted this. Here, Judith and Abra have just killed Holofernes and are preparing to depart with their trophy, his head. At a tense moment, they have not yet escaped and seem to react to a sound off canvas, perhaps a guard stirring. Gentileschi shows Judith as a solid, mature woman, unidealized in her looks, but dressed in the clothes of a noble woman. She is alert to the danger of her mission, but registers caution rather than fear. Many male artists, including Gentileschi's father, have depicted Judith as standing triumphant with Holofernes' head, but Gentileschi chose to capture the danger and risk. It is thought that perhaps with this painting and other images of Judith, Gentileschi attempted to resolve feelings about Tassi. Judith succeeds at the ultimate revenge by killing the aggressor. In Florence, Gentileschi became associated with the Medici court and received a commission from the Casa Buonarroti to paint an allegory of inclination for the ceiling of the building's art gallery. The panel was part of a series about Michelangelo. Often thought to be an angel, Gentileschi shows a young nude woman who holds a compass. It is believed that the subject bears a resemblance to Gentileschi. Several of Gentileschi's heroines have a similar appearance to her self-portraits. Gentileschi became a successful court painter, enjoying the patronage of the House of Medici and Charles I of England. Artemisia's work in Florence would mark the first step in her path toward artistic legacy. In works like this one of Mary Magdalene, Gentileschi perfected her sense of color. Gentileschi chose to recount the story of Mary Magdalene's difficult path by portraying a young woman with wild hair wrapped in a magnificent yellow silk gown, holding a mirror, the symbol of vanity, and inscribed with the words that I translate to you, you have chosen the best part, namely virtue, away from her. The beam of intense light illuminates the figure from the right, a demonstration of the technique Gentileschi would have learned by studying Caravaggio's works in Rome, and conveys the sense of drama that envelopes this subject. Under 17th century laws, women could not independently purchase art materials, sign contracts, or travel. The only way to get around these rules was to study at an art academy, which was very difficult for women to get into at the time. Gentileschi was the first woman to be accepted into the Florentine Academy of Fine Arts, where she was able to continue her artistic studies. Gentileschi was held in high esteem by both the royal court and scholars. Despite her success, Gentileschi and her husband overspent and struggled financially. The loss of, sadly, of 3 children and her husband's infidelity and extravagant spending had taken their toll, and in 1621, eager for a fresh start, Gentileschi moved to Rome with her husband and their surviving daughter. However, financial distress and her husband's jealousy continued to erode their marriage. In 1622, her husband slashed a man's face in a jealous rage, and the marriage officially ended. Now on her own, Gentileschi enjoyed a freedom and independence known to few of her female contemporaries. On the left here, we see her first image of Lucretia, a respected Roman matron raped by Sextus Tarquinius, the arrogant son of the king of Rome. Lucretia is about to kill herself to spare her family dishonor. However, she appears to struggle for courage to complete the act. And on the right, Gentileschi's first Cleopatra, which shows the Egyptian queen at the moment of committing suicide. Cleopatra prefers death by poisonous snake bite rather than by being dragged in public behind the chariot wheels of Octavius, soon to be Augustus Caesar, Rome's first emperor. Gentileschi would keep returning to the figures of Judith and her maidservant. The moment depicted here has taken place after the murder, while Judith's maidservant is placing the severed head in a bag. Possibly after hearing a noise, Judith seems to be checking around her for witnesses. The shadowy interior is theatrically illuminated by a single candle. Judith's hand shields her face from the glow, drawing attention to Holofernes' discarded iron gauntlet. The viewer's eye travels to the object in the maidservant's hands, Holofernes' severed head. Despite her artistic reputation, her strong personality, and her numerous good relationships, Rome was not as lucrative as Gentileschi had hoped. Patrons appreciated only her portraits and biblical heroines. Gentileschi never received any of the lucrative commissions for altarpieces that were being given at the time. Sometime after 1627, and after she is believed to have given birth to another daughter, and we don't know for sure who that father was, Gentileschi moved to Venice. Among Gentileschi's most ambitious works, this painting recounts the story of the Jewish heroine Esther, who appeared before King Ahasuerus to plead for her people, breaking with court etiquette and risking death. She fainted in the king's presence, but the king granted her favor. The story is shown here not as a historical recreation, but as a contemporary theatrical performance. Gentileschi's use of lighting, details, and style help her to represent Esther as a biblical heroine, as well as the main protagonist of this work. The work was revised after it was first painted. X-rays done by the Metropolitan Museum of Art revealed changes in the composition. Ahasuerus, dressed as a stylish dandy a la Caravaggio, originally stood below Esther, and a small boy with a barking dog appeared at the foot of the steps. In 1630, Gentileschi moved to Naples on the invitation of the Spanish viceroy, the Duke Alcala. Naples was a city rich with artistic workshops and art lovers, and there Gentileschi started working for the first time on paintings in a cathedral. Gentileschi was commissioned to paint this work, one of a series of 6 scenes portraying the life of St. John the Baptist that were painted for the chapel dedicated to this saint on the grounds of the Buen Retiro Palace in Madrid. The composition of this painting, which emphasizes the female neighbors and maidservants rather than the miracle of the story, is distinctly secular. It is one of Gentileschi's most renowned works from her Naples period and is especially recognized for its detailed rendering of fabrics and floor tiles. In 1638, Gentileschi joined her father in London at the court of Charles I of England. Father and daughter are once again working together, although that was not Gentileschi's only reason for traveling to London. King Charles I had called her to his court, and it was not possible to refuse. The king was a fanatical collector, and this work was in his collection. Gentileschi's self-portrait was very much in demand among 17th century collectors who were attracted by her outstanding artistic abilities and her unusual status as a female artist. Here, Gentileschi wears a brown apron over her green dress and holds a brush in one hand and palette in the other, cleverly identifying herself as the female personification of painting, something her male contemporaries could never do. As a self-portrait, this painting is particularly sophisticated and accomplished. The position in which Gentileschi has portrayed herself would have been extremely difficult to capture in a self-portrait. In order to view her own image, Gentileschi may have arranged 2 mirrors on either side of herself facing each other. Depicting herself in the act of painting in this challenging pose, the angle and position of her head would have been the hardest to accurately render, requiring skillful visualization. In 1639, Gentileschi's father died, and 2 years later, Gentileschi herself relocated to Naples, where she lived out the remainder of her life. There are 3 known works by Gentileschi of Bathsheba bathing. They are similar in composition and differ only in details. In all cases, the nude Bathsheba is seated before a balustrade surrounded by her maids. All three were done in Naples when Gentileschi was well over 50. Here, Bathsheba has finished her bath. She is fixing her hair using a mirror held by a servant. Other servants walk around. Perhaps she has already received King David's message. David has been watching her from his balcony at the top left and asks her to pay him a visit. Little is known of the final years of Gentileschi's life. She is thought to have died at the age of 60 in the devastating plague that swept Naples in 1656 and virtually wiped out an entire generation of Neapolitan artists. While Gentileschi was a recognized painter in her lifetime, after her death, a great deal of her work fell into obscurity. Even when Gentileschi's work was rediscovered in the early 20th century, literature on it was plagued with misattributations and overly sexualized interpretations that focused on her assault rather than on her artistry. This work was recently rediscovered in a private collection in southern France. It was unrecognized for 40 years by its owners. In 2019, it sold for the record price of $5.2 million. It portrays the ancient heroine amidst a swirl of drapery, eyes turned upward, a dagger pointed to her breast. On March 30th of 2021, the J. Paul Getty Museum announced that it had acquired this painting. As of today, about 60 works have been attributed to Gentileschi. Many of them had previously been attributed to male contemporaries, including other followers of Caravaggio, or to her father. Gentileschi's impact on the history of art as a woman artist who fought against adversity to pursue a career in painting is undeniable. And our last look is at a Baroque artist that you may not have heard of. Michelina Wattier broke convention with other 17th century women artists by painting genre scenes, mythological subjects, and large altarpieces. Wattier was born in 1604 in Mons, outside Brussels. She had 8 siblings, 6 brothers and 2 older sisters. Wattier's brother Charles also became a painter. And around 1654, Wattier and Charles moved to Brussels, where they remained until the end of their lives. They shared a studio and had similar clientele. It is believed that Wattier never married and did not have children. Wattier's work has often been misattributed to other artists, and her self-portrait was no exception. In 1905, Walter Shaw Sparrow included Wattier's self-portrait in his 3-volume Women Painters of the World. But he identified it as a portrait executed by herself of Artemisia Gentileschi, who lived for a time in England and worked for Charles I. It was auction specialists and a Van Dyck scholar at the University in Leuven in Belgium who uncovered the mistakes surrounding this self-portrait. Through Wattier's paintings, scholars have concluded that she had an excellent knowledge of classical mythology and symbolism, which indicates an outstanding education and indicates that she was probably born into a family with means. Unlike many other women painters of this period, Wattier received recognition during her lifetime. In particular, she was supported by her patron, Archduke Leopold Wilhelm, who was governor of the Spanish Netherlands from 1647 to 1656. Wilhelm commissioned works from Wattier and acquired 4 of her paintings for his own collection, which also included works by Rubens and Van Dyck. Wattier is the one and only female artist by whom Leopold Wilhelm purchased works. A catalog of the Archduke's collection was drawn up in 1659, and the following 4 works by Wattier were included. 2 portraits of Saint Joachim were originally both in oil. Saint Joachim with a book survives now only as an etching. Saint Joachim is regarded as the father of the Virgin Mary. Tradition has it that Saint Joachim was a retired priest or holy man. In the Catholic tradition, he is the patron saint of fathers, grandfathers, or grandparents, married couples, cabinet makers, and linen traders. Saint Joachim images often include some of the symbols associated with him, such as a book or scroll representing linen makers and doves representing peace. The catalog also includes this portrait of Saint Joseph. The story of why he is shown with lilies, actually a legend, goes like this. Joachim and Anna, the Virgin Mary's parents, presented Mary in the temple when she was 3 years old, and she remained there as a temple virgin dedicated to God's service. When Mary was on the verge of womanhood, the high priest announced that it was time for all the temple virgins of that age to return home so that marriages could be arranged for them. Mary, however, said that she could not do this since her parents had dedicated her to the service of the Lord. When the priest sought guidance from God, a loud voice called forth all of the men of the house of David who had not taken a wife, instructing them to come to the temple and to bring a branch to lay on the altar. The voice said that one of the branches would bloom forth with flowers, and that the Holy Spirit, in the form of a dove, would land upon the branch. Joseph was one of the men who came, and when he placed his branch on the altar, it immediately bloomed into flowers, and a dove descended from heaven and landed on it, thus revealing that Joseph was to take the Virgin Mary as his spouse. And also in the Archduke's collection was the Triumph of Bacchus, thought to be Watier's finest work. The Triumph of Bacchus depicts the god of wine capturing every fold of the fleshy, corpulent fat that threatens to spill over the animal's skin draped across his loins. As Bacchus's glazed over eyes turned toward a vine of green grapes, his lips opened to receive splashes of the fruit's juice. Wattier included herself as a bare-breasted follower of the Roman deity. She is the only figure to meet the viewer's gaze head-on. At a time when women could not study anatomy, and unlike many male artists, did not have access to nude models, Wattier's ability to paint the human body is very impressive. Some researchers believe she may have had access to live models through her brother, since he was also a painter and, most importantly, a man. In 2018, the Belgian art historian and Wattier expert, Kathleen van der Stegen, said Michelina Wattier was everything that most women of the time could not be: multifaceted, idiosyncratic, uninhibited. She was a fascinating, self-assured, highly talented woman that for once is not a victim, but someone who has training and uses her talent to create the works that she wants to make, not those that were imposed upon her by her environment. This Wattier work was initially misattributed. Originally listed Jacob van Oost, another Flemish painter of the time period, as the artist. Research done in 2007 led to the reattribution to Wattier. In this double portrait, one boy is blowing bubbles with a straw as the other tries to catch one in his hat. The bubble is a perfect orb which can pop at any moment and is a familiar symbol of the fragility and brevity of life. To enforce the point, Wattier includes a snuffed out candle and an hourglass in the background. As with the bubble, both are symbolic of the passing of time and were familiar motifs in 17th century painting. Here, two girls pose as Saint Agnes and Saint Dorothea. The identity of the girls is unknown. Hanging behind them is a red cloth that lights up their faces. The blonde girl is stroking a lamb, playing the part of Saint Agnes. The other girl is laying roses around a basket of apples and is holding a martyr's palm in her left hand. She is acting as Saint Dorothy. Portraying yourself or your children as historical or allegorical figures drawn from the Bible or classical stories is called a portrait historique. Saint Agnes and Saint Dorothea were appropriate figures for girls to identify with, as many 17th century parents may have wished their daughters to grow up following their example. Wattier died in 1689 at the age of 85, and her name, if not her work, all but disappeared. Her surviving work was mostly misattributed, sometimes to Gentileschi or other times to her brother Charles or other male artists. In 2018, this painting turned up in an auction in Cologne, where it was initially considered to be a 17th century Dutch school, then thought that it could be related to Van Oost or Wattier. The auction house contacted Belgian art historian and Wattier expert Kathleen van der Stegen, that and the auction house, the expert concluded that on the basis of the strong stylistic similarities with her other works, that this painting was indeed by Wattier, and the Phoebus Foundation paid $562,000 for it then. The painting portrays two young boys, one holding an egg with a pastry stick in one hand away from his friend. With the other hand, the boy almost pushes him backwards while gazing at him over his shoulder. This painting was added to the first ever solo exhibition dedicated to Wattier, organized by Van der Stichelen, which was held in 2018 in Antwerp, just 2 weeks after the discovery of this painting. And the exhibition was able to include about 30 works by Wattier. In most recent news, in 2020, a complete cycle of Wattier's paintings representing the five senses, previously considered lost, was reunited. The last knowledge of these works was from a single black and white illustration in a 1975 auction catalog. Their whereabouts had been a mystery in the study of Flemish art. Last year, perhaps for the first time in 370 years, Wattier's five senses were exhibited together in an exhibition at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. In detailed portrayals, Wattier shows boys performing everyday activities that express each of the five senses. Sight shows a youth looking intensely through a pair of glasses at his own hand. In smell, rotten eggs release what has been described as a potent stench and is far from traditional personifications of the sense of smell, where an idealized woman sniffs a flower. Hearing shows a youth playing the recorder, beckoning the viewer to listen. Touch depicts different methods of touch. The blood dripping from the boy's left hand indicates that his sharp knife slipped while whittling, and he puts his hand on his head, figuring out what to do. Wattier depicts taste in what could be an advertisement for bread, with his lips planted on his food, and the boy locks eyes with us as he is taking a bite. It is likely that other of Wattier's paintings are waiting to be rediscovered, and as that happens, we'll be able to learn more about her. So I thank you for joining me. If you would like a list of where some of the works mentioned in this lecture can be found, and many of them are not within driving distance, but we always try to include some that are. You can email us at info@artscapades.com. Include that you're asking for great women in art. And we are going to be back on May 8th with a lecture titled The Northern Renaissance, from Big Picture to Minute Details. And the fun thing about it is, of the 4 Northern Renaissance artists we're going to be looking at, one of them is Hans Holbein the Younger, who spent a great deal of his time as the court painter to Henry VIII. So since so many of you may be familiar with or have seen or heard about the musical Six on Broadway, which is about the wives of Henry VIII, Cindy and ArtScapades thought it would be fun to bring you the works of Hans Holbein, which feature the wives of Henry VIII. So I hope you'll mark that date on your calendar and join us then. I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Oh, good. Thank you
I
for
just-
joining me.
I really enjoyed it.
Were you
have both of
familiar
the
with the
books you're
artist?
referring to.
Were you
Oh,
familiar with?
sure. I,
Oh, good.
I
Oh,
just got
good.
angry. I just got angry when, the artist who did a perfectition was dismissed as being, she was great.
Yeah, it's been the Women's Museum in Washington, D.C. is doing a great deal of work also now on promoting, especially, women artists that have gone unappreciated. Their discovery is happening, and it's becoming more and more commonplace now to find their works in big museums. So, Women's History
Well,
Month is definitely a good time to talk about them. We
well,
do.
Vasari sure appreciated him.
Oh, Vasari, yeah, he did, and he was really, the foremost art critic of his time. And if Vasari said it, it was true. So
Yeah.
it is good, but we try to, normally we try to throw in a woman artist, in our lectures, be it about the Renaissance. We also now we do a lecture that strictly talks about women impressionists, and we do another lecture that strictly talks about some women modern abstract artists. So we've tried to really pinpoint them as well as put them in when we can. But Women's History Month was a great time to talk about them all.
Bravo.
This was
Bravo.
great. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, and I hope you'll join us for the Northern Renaissance. You know, some of the other artists, you know, Van Eyck, who was the foremost, you know, Northern Flemish artist. His works are amazing to look at. And then we talk about oh, Bruegel, and Bruegel's like a Where's Waldo. He's got more little characters going on than anybody. It's like so fun to look at a Bruegel work of art. So it's a really fun lecture and a nice change of
Thank you. I
pace.
can't wait.
Good.
Can't wait. My wife goes to the library all the time,
Oh,
but I
good.
just sit home and watch Zooms.
Well, that's good. We're glad you do. So that we offer a combination, and so there's something for everybody. So thank you so much. Thank you, Cindy, for having
Thank
us.
you. Thank you all.
And I look forward to seeing y'all in May. And
Right.
the flowers should be blooming by then, right? Or starting to bloom, the crocuses or somebody, daffodils. Somebody should be up and blooming
Oh,
by
they're
May.
starting to come up. I've got daffodils
Oh,
and
do
phlox
you?
in my yard right now.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, by May 8th, I'm expecting real springtime out there. All right, thank you all so much. Have a good rest of your evening.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.